Wherever you are, close your eyes. Unless you're driving or flying a plane, then absolutely don't close your eyes. Or if you're cycling, don't do that. Actually, keep your eyes open. Yeah. And think, with your eyes open, about winning. Feels pretty great, doesn't it? And now you can do it anywhere with the National Lottery app. Download the National Lottery app today. Play anywhere, win anywhere.
Blog Talk Radio.
Follow, 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 follow the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick, follow the yellow brick road. You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. You'll find he is the winner, the whiz, if ever a whiz there was. If ever a whiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. The title of our episode, Dorothy Has Left Kansas. We'll be talking about the legislative race in Kansas, the 4th Congressional District, which encompasses a major city of Wichita, Kansas. We talked about this last night, but we bring this up because the race is later today. It is a race against a guy named Ron Estes and also an attorney named James Thompson. And it is one of those races that is highlighted because it's a special race. Mike Pampro, the CIA director, was his district. That district it was not on the radar, as a Politico article says, and Kansas should not be in play, but Kansas is in play. It's according to a Republican consultant. The ads play to the base ahead of a low expectation turnouts. Now, this is always the case. These special elections and midterm elections usually are low turnouts, so they need to get the base out. Obviously, on Thompson's side, the progressive people need to get their people out. Now, what makes this a very interesting race, I was thinking about it. This is something DJ Trump carried this district in phenomenal terms, but however, though, there's also another dynamic playing out. The governor there in Kansas, very unpopular, Brownback. They've had some very close elections. Now, if this guy Thompson can appeal to some moderate Republicans, and then with Democrats, the city of Wichita at one time, with the aircraft industry there, was sort of a union town, so within a right-to-work state, but not an extreme state. The reason the Republicans are running ads on a flippable, saying that Thompson's too extreme for Kansas, and this Estes guy is running on a pro-life ticket, astonishing voters to stand up for life. Well, everybody stands up for life. It's silly. They put $67,000 into the race. That is the Republican Party, and they have indeed on the Democratic side a typical situation. The Kansas Party would not commit $20,000 for a mailer. Now, mailers are not as important these days as perhaps they would be, but that would get out your older voters. And when you look back 20 years before this district flipped, you would be talking definitely about older voters. So if you have older voters in your prospectus, then you have a situation whereby you need to look in that direction to get those voters out that have not been present, and also younger voters, which they intend to get out in as great a numbers as they can to sort of counteract what the right is trying to do with their base. And it is the right's base in a very interesting situation there as far as this district is concerned. Now,
problem that affects not just one gender, real people that are responsible for exploitation.
that was Jim Thompson speaking there, and what we'll attempt to do here is move some of this material from another server, and we'll see if we can get this commercial also up here without having to go here. And of course you're hearing this through a speaker, so probably we'll have to work on this a little later here to get the quality up, but we'll see what we can do. This is the special election, and what we are attempting to do here is get...
You know, I think because of how this is all going down with the kind of sentiment that's around the country, I think that there's a great opportunity for Democrats to come in and really kind of break through that barrier that we've had here in Kansas. I think with kind of the climate that's going on right now, I think Democrats are willing to fight. I think we're ready to come out full force and rally behind whoever the candidate is.
This is so tough because it has been tight throughout. It remained tight to the end, but I'm pleased to announce that James Thompson is our party's
We all want the same things on both sides of the aisle, really. We want to have a family that has the ability to get educated. We want jobs that are decent and have a livable wage. We want to make sure that our education for our children is there. We want to make sure that Social Security and veterans benefits are there for the people that have protected us when we were young. We want to make sure that we have all of the things that the Progressive Party has. We all want the American dream. So again, not only must we persist, we have to resist. Our protests in support of basic human rights for people of all color, sex, religion, sexual orientation are ridiculed by our so-called leaders. We are told to quit resisting, to get a job, or that if we don't like it, we can go to another country. Well, this is my country. Unlike most of the elected officials that are Republicans, and unlike my Republican opponent, I was in the military. I picked up a weapon and stood the post. I served my country and defended it. They didn't. So this is my country, and I've earned the right to be here.
That was from kansascity.com there, and we'll move on here. But at the same time, we have a repeated situation, and the inflammatory ad, we talked about it, and there was a debate forum, we'll call it, at Friends University, it's a Quaker University in Wichita, Kansas. And then the National Republican Congressional Committee put in almost $100,000 ad leading up to it. And the ad in itself is one of these assumption alternative fact type ads. And this is usually what last minute bit of agapomp they call it, and it is used to infuriate and get out the base. But sometimes these things can backfire. Let me see if I can get the ad here. I think you'll be able to hear it, although it was coming off a different server. And that was the Ron Estes ad against Jim Thompson. And the situation is, back to the alternative facts, what Jim Thompson has said unequivocally that he supports a woman's right to choose. What the Republican types have said, he's pro-choice, but there was nothing said that evening by anyone about late-term abortions or sex-selected abortions. Now, this was the forum at the Friends University. Professor Fox was the person that moderated the debate. Now, this was between Thompson and 4 other candidates. And to make this clear, he said he felt the abortion issue was settled by Roe versus Wade, which upheld a woman's right to an abortion but allowing for increased strict regulations in second and third trimesters of pregnancy. He also said that he did not want the government involved in his daughter's health care, and talking about the Hyde Amendment. Old Hyde, of course, is in jail now for improper conduct with underage boys. He was a representative from Illinois. And Fox wrote, Professor Fox, I can tell you there asked a question, and I heard what was said, and it wasn't what is claimed in the ad. Now, the Estes issued a release on Saturday afternoon saying that Thompson stated opposition to any restriction on abortion would allow, and see, this is attorney facts, late-term and sex-selected abortions. Now, that's reading lots into it. I've not heard of any sex-selected abortions. Now, in some countries, yes, that has happened, but we've not heard it in the American body politic or in the American social context. Now, that is not what Thompson said. What Thompson has said, and I read it again, is upheld a woman's right to an abortion, but allows for increased. Now, this is a Roe versus Wade decision. If you look at it and the evolution of it, they have put those restrictions in, and those restrictions have been upheld. Now, this little adjustment of quote-unquote facts here is in itself a lie. Saying it was appropriate to expropriate Thompson's comments to include late-term abortions, etc. That in itself is obvious to just about anyone, but it isn't. But is that a woman's right to choose is a phrase that means at any time, for any reason, by any method. That's an absolute lie, because the fetus is a non-living piece of tissue, but which has no rights and which can be viewed as a complete inconvenience to the mother. Now, this is a right-wing interpretation there. They have argued that the fetus does have life, and again, this is not based on biology, it's based on some emotional trap, which by definition can be removed in by any means necessary by an abortionist without any legal risk to the abortionist. Now, this is just nutty. And this is from some guy named Benjamin Hogue, a former legislator from Johnson County. This 11th hour intervention here, the National Republican intervened in the race because of their word. No doubt they are word. And we started this with the Cook Report. What they've done was moved it from solid Republican to a likely Republican. But they're bringing in pro-Estes robocalls, Lion Ted Cruz, and anyone else that they could get into the race. So this is basically where they are in the scenario. Let me just check one more time and we'll move on here. But this is from the Wichita Eagle. Has your polling place changed what you need to know to vote on a Tuesday? And let me just bring this up here. Ted Cruz has campaigned here for this guy Estes, and saying today the eyes of the nation, and we started off here with the Yellow Brick Road, are on Kansas. Ted Cruz urged Kansas in the 4th District to support Estes in the special election. He called on members of the crowd to vote and take 9 other people with them. Estes, Republican state treasurer, is locked in a hard-fought battle with Jim Thompson. Now, this Estes has ran a statewide race there, and there's also a libertarian in that Rockhole. A flight instructor is also in the race. Cruz said DJ Trump's victory in the November election was an overwhelming try for the American people to change the path we're on. Now, that's absolutely silly. The mandate we were given, they were not given a mandate. This is a problem. Cruz's visit was part of a full-court press by the National Republicans to boost Estes' campaign the final days. Estes needs your vote, needs it badly. President Trump told an automated call, called Estes a conservative leader who is going to work with me to make America great again. Last year he was easily the winner over Trump in the Kansas Republican caucus. They're talking here about Lion Ted Cruz. I love the fact that he can fight his own fight. Thompson said, can't fight his own fight. He's got the vice president making calls for him. He's got the Speaker of the House, little Paulie Ryan, who sent out a fundraising letter. Now he's got Cruz coming in, and I'm still here fighting the same fight I've been fighting all along. That's Big Jim Thompson there. I think it's sad, but he can't do debates. He can't do his own fundraising. He can't fight his own fights. Thompson added, so if he can't do any of those things, why is he running in the first place? Excuse me. Back at the airport, the tax accountant Anchorman, 62, was fairly typical of the crowd. He was active in conservative politics. He said once he served as a campaign treasurer. I worked for Ron's wife for the American Perspective. Wait a minute here. Yeah. So that's basically the kinds of people out here, and where Cruz was trying to take the election now. To finish this up, where he worked there. That was funded by the infamous Koch brothers. They are of Wichita, Kansas. The husband listened to Susan. I know he's going to hear good things. That's in this Ackerman character. And we go on here to say that while I aligned myself with the Republican Party, he said, and of course, the right to life, health reform of all the speakers there, no doubt. In a statement he called somewhat tongue-in-cheek, he proposed to padlock the IRS building in Washington. Now this is sending its 90,000 workers to the south of the border. Now this is the kind of rhetoric that you hear out here, and you hear a lot of it. The seat has been opened since January. This guy went to the CIA. The election marks the first major election test. Well, it's not much of an election test. What we have here is a district that is a very conservative district, but itself they are scared that problems could happen here. In other words, there could be upsets, and it's a lot of it. Let me get to Trump's robocalls here. Making a robocall for Estes. part of this. I don't know if we'll be able to hear this robocall operation or not that he's making here to make America great again.
Hello, this is President Donald Trump, and I have something big to tell you. This Tuesday, April 11th, there is a very important special election for Congress in Kansas. On Tuesday, Republican Ron Estes needs your vote and needs it badly. Ron is a conservative leader who's going to work with me to make America great again. We're going to do things really great for our country. Our country needs help. Ron is going to be helping us big league. But I need Republicans like Ron Estes to help me get the job done. This is an important election. There's really few very much more important, and I need your vote for Ron Estes on Tuesday. So, April 11th, Tuesday, please join me in supporting Republican Ron Estes for Congress. He's going to help me do a really, really good job for our country. Thank you very much.
This is a very interesting situation that Trump is reduced to coming out here and trying to get this Estes guy elected, and according to him, the vote is badly needed. Let's move on here to, we'll have incidentally the resistance report. That'll be from Dr. Robert Reich of the Berkeley University. But firstly here, there's some more of the handiwork of Mr. DJ Trump and company in the state of Texas. This is from the Caller Times in, I believe, San Antonio, the Corpus Christi Caller Times. Anyway, Texas voter ID law was intended to discriminate. A federal judge who previously found the Texas lawmakers disenfranchised people of color when it passed a voter ID law, questioned the state's lawyers Tuesday, who denied the legislation was intended it to be discriminatory. The U.S. judge there, Nelver Gomez Ramos, interrupted the Texas Assistant Attorney General Comantro 3 times during a hearing in the Corpus Christi courtroom. The judge questioned the lawyer arguments meant to prove the legislature did not have ill intent, and the law was drawn wide public support. But there could be some public support for things that are unconstitutional, correct? Rachel Denny Crow. The Texas controversial voter ID law was created with the intent to discriminate against minorities. A federal judge ruled. The federal judge Gomez Ramos wrote in her 10-page ruling on Monday that there is evidence to show that discrimination was at least one of the substantial and are motivating factors behind the passage of SB 14, made it a violation of the Voters' Rights Act. The new ruling reinforces her 2014 decision, and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has agreed. The 2011 law undermined minority voting rights because of the accepted form of IDs have proven harder for Latinos and African Americans to obtain than Europeans. It is clear that the legislature knew that minority or people of color voters would be more affected by the voter ID law. However, the political lives of some legislatures depend on the law's success. That was her 2014 appeal. The Fifth Circuit judges had ordered Gomez Ramos to determine the legislature's intent in passing the voter ID law. The judge heard arguments in February. At the same time, the state attorney general argued that pending legislation would remedy the issues the federal court identified bill SB 5 mirrors a situation that's according to Gomez Ramos, had ordered last year ahead of the presidential election. The judge has said the latest bill did not impact her duty to rule on the intent of the controversial 2011 law. In an opinion last week, the judge said she would wait until after the legislative session to order remedies. The next hearing in the case is on June the 7th. Gomez Ramos cited unusual steps the legislature took to push through the 2011 law and lawmakers' willingness to pay $2 million to enact the law, even though the state was facing a $27 million shortfall. She also called the terms unduly strict, and noted that it wasn't proven to be a safeguard against voter fraud. The state did not demonstrate that these features of SB 14 were necessary and consistent with the alleged interest in preventing voter fraud and increasing confidence in the electoral system. The Mexican American Legislative Caucus Policy Chair and State Representative Eddie Rodriguez called Gomez Ramos' ruling a victory for all Texans. You cannot afford to allow politically motivated majorities in the legislature to disregard the Constitution and pass discriminatory legislation, leaving civil rights advocates to fight an uphill battle for years against the taxpayer-funded Texas Attorney General's office for any chance of recourse. That's from Mr. Rodriguez. The Department of Justice, which once sided with the plaintiffs, included civil rights groups who drew from the case after DJ Trump was sworn in. And and this shows what can happen when you have situations here like this particular one. And this is part of the problem that we see increasingly, or we saw in the 2016 election. Voter suppression was a very important situation. The scrubbing of people from the registration rolls suppressed the vote, and that was advantageous to the Republican Party. And then other political machinations within the Democratic Party of a very flawed candidate there that put the election in the hand by 80,000 votes of DJ Trump. And this has to be understood, what actually happened there and how it was played out. And now, with the appointment willy-nilly of any right-wing judge, including Attila the Hun, to the Supreme Court, now you have a situation where the rights of people for the next 20 or 30 years could be in jeopardy. And this is a situation in which we work against. So new stratagems have to be invented. And one of the problems was highlighted by the bombing of the Air Force base in Syria, and how the monopoly press played a very important role there in terms of the service of Wilsonian foreign policy, a racist foreign policy, that they played it up. They congratulated DJ Trump, and now we see even an EP story going further than that, that the Russian Federation personnel there were in collusion with the Syrian government and the gas attack. Now, that is outrageous, but this is a sort of atmosphere in which we labor. The Congress, of course, is on an Easter recess. For WBRN Radio in Boston, this is Boston Red. Dorothy left Kansas is the title of the episode. On we go to an edited version of Professor Robert Reich and his resistance report. We're going to start featuring that You can find that in its entirety on his Facebook page, and now as a podcast on iTunes. We are there also. We don't spotlight iTunes as much, but nonetheless, we are there.
Is now 80 years old. Stephen Breyer, a Clinton appointee, is now 78 years old. Now bear those numbers in mind. Nobody can predict the future, obviously, but if you are putting somebody on the court who is 49 years old, the chances are that you're putting that person on there not just for the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 8 or 12 years, possibly for decades to come, which is why this appointment is so important. In fact, he was sworn in this morning, but he will go to work almost immediately. The court meets privately on Thursday to consider what cases it's going to take for next term of the Supreme Court. And Neil Gorsuch is going to be part of that meeting. He's going to be perhaps the swing vote on deciding what cases the court considers. And on that list of potential cases is a plea that the court decide whether the Second Amendment grants a right to carry firearms outside the home. Another asks whether businesses may refuse to provide wedding services to same-sex couples. Next week, the court begins its last round of oral arguments for the term, and Gorsuch will be sitting in on those oral arguments. He has in the past defended the rights of religious objectors to laws they say violate their belief. So he could be the deciding vote in a major separation of church and state case from Missouri, which will be argued very soon. Neil Gorsuch will, in all likelihood, be Donald Trump's most lasting legacy. Now, we wish him well. Mostly, though, we hope that he puts ideology aside and considers first and foremost the common good. What Americans need now in the 21st century, not the 18th century. Which gets me, in terms of thinking institutionally, thinking about long-term consequences of what you're doing to the governing structure of America, I can't help but mention once again Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is sort of the person in the background with regard to Neil Gorsuch and much else. I can't think of a man who has done more in recent years to undermine the functioning of the United States government than Mitch McConnell. A lot of people are saying, in wake of the Gorsuch confirmation, that this is a great victory for Mitch McConnell, that he ought to be enormously proud, and he's acting awfully proud. I think it's just the opposite. I think he ought to be ashamed of what he has done and how he did it, because it has a lasting impact. It has a lasting consequence for the institutions of our government, how the Senate operates, for example. You may remember that as Majority Leader of the Senate in 2010, Mitch McConnell famously declared that the single, and I'm quoting him now, the single most important thing we want to achieve is for President Obama to be a one-term president. The single most important objective. Now that's the Majority Leader of the Senate speaking. When you think of all of the other things that could have been a major objective for the Senate, for the government of the United States, for the Majority Leader, his number one objective was to make Obama a one-term president. By 2013, Mitch McConnell had led filibusters of 79 of Obama's court nominees. That's compared to 68 filibusters in the entire previous history of the United States. I just want to say that once again so we have a context for understanding the contributions of Mitch McConnell to the deterioration of the Senate. By 2013, he had led filibusters against 79 of Barack Obama's nominees to the federal court system, compared to 68 filibusters against nominees to the federal courts in the entire history of the United States. After Justice Antonin Scalia died and his death was confirmed last year, it took Mitch McConnell less than 1 hour to say that that vacancy should be filled by the next president. This weekend, there are a lot of comments about how insightful Mitch McConnell was to act so quickly, to think so quickly. That is not a matter of insight. That's a matter of party politics, folks. That's not a matter of statesmanship. That's a matter of being very quick on your feet in terms of what your partisan needs are. He called keeping Obama's nominee off the court, quote, one of my proudest moments, unquote. Well, you can be proud, Mitch, if you want to be proud. The rest of us regard it as one of your most shameful moments, not out of partisanship, but again, out of thinking institutionally, thinking about what you did and have done to the Senate. Although McConnell's predecessors as majority leader, they haven't all been models of collegiality, but at least they have tried to be collegial, tried to reach out to members on the other side of the aisle. What does Mitch McConnell do? You remember? He silenced Elizabeth Warren. Unheard of in the Senate. And then on Thursday came his use of the nuclear option, that is, breaking the Senate rules and having Gorsuch confirmed by 51 votes, ending the tradition of the filibuster, dating back to 1789. 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, when Obama was president, McConnell said he would abolish the filibusters of Supreme Court justices only, he said, if there were 67 senators in favor of doing that. He did it with 51 senators. Mitch McConnell is not just a hypocrite. He has left in his wake, and history will judge him to have left behind him a Senate that is far less capable of fulfilling its mission. That is not success. Across government, across American society today, you have more and more people, whether they're CEOs or they're on Wall Street or they're in government, wherever they are, what they are doing is they are ripping up institutions. They're basically saying, my short-term goals, my greed, my party, my personal needs take precedence over making this institution work in the future. Today, Wells Fargo report showing that its top two officers basically disregarded all of the signs that Wells Fargo was defrauding customers. Why did its top two officers disregard all of those signs? Why did they risk a major drop in public trust toward Wells Fargo, toward the entire banking system? For the same reason that Wall Street bankers, for years before 2008, put their own needs and their greed ahead of the institutional responsibilities of the financial industry. They made a lot of money. Not one of them went to jail. But they helped contribute to cynicism about all the major institutions of our society. Which gets us back to Donald Trump. Talk about cynicism. In last year's campaign, Donald Trump said that he would not spend time playing golf if elected president, including the courses he owns, he would not go to those resorts. I'm going to quote him to you. This is only from a few years ago. Quote, "You know what? And I love golf," he said, "but if I were in the White House, I don't think I'd ever seen Turnberry," that's his resort in Scotland, again. "I don't think I'd ever seen Doral again. I own Doral in Miami. I don't think I'd ever seen many of the places that I have," he said. "I don't ever think that I'd see anything. I want to stay in the White House and work my ass off. Make great deals, right? Who's going to leave? Who's going to leave the White House?" Unquote. A few years ago, he criticized President Obama. Can you believe that with all of the problems and difficulties facing the United States, President Obama spent the day playing golf? Unquote. Well, it turns out that over a third of the time that Donald Trump has been president of the United States so far, he's been outside the White House. He hasn't been on foreign trips, visiting foreign countries. He hasn't been touring endangered areas of the United States or where tragedies have occurred around the world. No, Donald Trump has been out of the White House at his resorts. Over a third of the time he has been president, he's been hopping from one resort to another, giving them enormous free publicity along the way. But Trump doesn't seem to care about conflicts of interest or free publicity. He does care about his golf resorts. And by the way, that costs a lot. It costs you a lot, it costs me a lot, it costs taxpayers a lot. Secret Service protection, actually taking the entire White House, essentially, and outsourcing it to Mar-a-Lago in Florida. That's where he's going again. He's getting ready to head off once again to Mar-a-Lago. Not to mention the cost of Secret Service protection for Ivanka and Jared and sons Eric and Donald Jr. When Eric and Donald Jr. are globetrotting for the Trump business, they get all of the Secret Service protections that you and I give them, and that's a lot. That's a lot of money. And, of course, Donald Trump's family back in New York. Donald Trump criticized Barack Obama not only for playing golf, but for being out of the White House. In 1 month, Donald Trump has spent more taxpayer money than Barack Obama did in an entire year on Secret Service protection for himself, for his family, on moving the White House. Trump says he needs time out of Washington. He needs a retreat. You know, there used to be something called Camp David. Anybody remember Camp David? That was where presidents went when they needed a retreat, when they met with foreign dignitaries and wanted to meet them outside the White House, when they wanted to meet with their staffs, when they wanted time alone. They went to Camp David. Camp David